What would you risk to claim a prize guarded by monsters and magic? And is the Golden Fleece truly a blessing or a curse waiting to be claimed? Welcome to Classic Storytime Hub. Tonight's tale is The Golden Fleece by Nathaniel Hawthorne, a classic tale reimagined and retold for the modern age. Jason's childhood did not unfold in a palace, nor beneath the watchful eyes of a crownless king and grieving queen. Instead, while the world beyond schemed and shifted, the boy was quietly removed from danger and delivered into the care of a teacher unlike any other, a figure spoken of in whispers, half legend and half impossibility. His name was Chiron. He did not live among men. His home was a shadowed cavern carved into the mountainside, where the air smelled of stone, wind, and wild earth. Those who approached it for the first time often stopped short, uncertain whether they were about to meet a man or something far older. From the waist down, Chiron bore the powerful body of a white horse, hooves striking sparks against rock. Above it rose the calm torso of a man, broad-shouldered and weathered, with eyes that held patience deeper than time. Strange as he appeared, there was no mockery in him, no savagery. He carried himself with the quiet authority of one who had taught heroes before they ever knew they were destined to become legends. And teach he did. Under Chiron's watch, boys did not merely learn lessons, they were forged. He trained their hands to guide the harp, their minds to understand healing, their arms to wield sword and shield with discipline rather than rage. This was an age before ink-stained fingers and counting tables. Education meant survival. It meant honor. It meant knowing when to strike and when not to. Among Chiron's pupils were names the world would one day echo forever. Heracles, with his brutal strength, Achilles, swift and deadly, Philoctetes, master of the bow, and Asclepius, who would unlock secrets of healing that bordered on the divine. Jason learned beside them, unaware that his own fate was quietly tightening around him. Some later claimed the truth had been exaggerated. Perhaps, they said, Chiron was only a man with a playful spirit, an eccentric old tutor who amused his students by pretending to be a beast, crawling across the stone floor, allowing laughter to soften hard lessons. Maybe the stories grew larger with each telling, passed from fathers to sons until imagination filled in what memory forgot. Children, after all, have a way of reshaping reality when they don't quite understand it. But the stories never changed. They insist that Chiron truly strode into his lessons on 4 iron-shod hooves, the ground trembling beneath him, that instead of carrying a rod, he flicked a powerful tail, that now and then, in the middle of instruction, he would wander outside to graze beneath the open sky before returning, utterly unbothered, to resume the shaping of heroes. And so the tale endures, unchanged, unchallenged, as if the world itself agreed that such a teacher must have existed, because no ordinary man could have prepared boys for destinies so immense. Jason grew up where most boys would never survive a single night. From the moment he could breathe on his own, he belonged to the mountain cave, to stone walls that echoed with hoofbeats, to firelight dancing across rough rock, to the steady presence of Chiron. Seasons turned, years passed, and the infant hidden from assassins became a young man shaped by discipline, danger, and silence. Under Chiron's watchful eye, Jason learned more than skill. He learned restraint. His fingers found music in the strings of the harp. His hands learned the weight and balance of steel. He studied roots and herbs, the quiet remedies that saved lives long before battles ever ended them. And above all, he learned to ride, not merely to sit upon a horse, but to move as if man and beast shared a single breath. In that art, Chiron had no equal. By the time Jason reached full strength, his body was hardened, his movements precise, his gaze steady. He was no longer the child hidden from the world, and that was when impatience took hold. Without seeking counsel, without a farewell, Jason made his decision. He would leave the cave. He would test the world beyond the mountain. It was a reckless choice, one born not of wisdom, but of blood and inheritance stirring too loudly to ignore. For Jason had learned the truth. He was no shepherd's son. He was a prince. His father, the rightful king of Iolcus, had been stripped of his throne by a man named Peleus, a usurper, a traitor, a ruler who would have murdered Jason in infancy had fate not intervened and hidden him among legends. Now grown, Jason believed the time for hiding was over. Justice, as he saw it, required action. So he armed himself not as a king, but as a wanderer, a spear in each hand, a leopard skin cast across his shoulders to shield him from rain and cold. His long, sun-colored hair fell freely, caught by the wind as he stepped onto the open road. Yet of all he carried, it was his sandals that mattered most. They had belonged to his father. Golden cords bound them to his feet, worn but carefully kept, as if the past itself clung to him with every step. Jason wore them not for comfort, but for memory, for claim. As he passed through villages and along narrow paths, he drew eyes without meaning to. Women paused in their work, children pressed against doorways. No one had seen a traveler like this before, half hero, half mystery, moving with quiet purpose, armed yet unthreatening, beautiful in the dangerous way of someone heading toward fate without fully understanding its cost. They watched him disappear down the road, wondering where he was going and whether the world would ever be the same once he arrived. Jason had no way of knowing how many miles lay behind him when the road suddenly ended in chaos. A river tore across his path, dark, furious, alive. Its surface twisted into black spirals, streaked with white foam, racing forward as if fleeing something unseen. The sound alone was enough to stop him short. It did not flow, it roared, a deep, relentless thunder that drowned thought and warned of violence. In calmer seasons, the river might have been crossed without a second glance, but now it was swollen beyond reason, fed by relentless rain and the melting snows cascading down from Mount Olympus. The current slammed against jagged stone, flinging spray into the air like shattered glass. Jason stepped closer now. The riverbed was a graveyard of rock, sharp edges breaking the surface, waiting. As he watched, a massive uprooted tree spun into view, its branches splintered and stripped bare. The current dragged it like a broken weapon, wedging it between the rocks before wrenching it loose again. Moments later, a lifeless sheep drifted past. Then something larger, a cow. The river carried its wreckage without slowing. This was no place for pride. Jason tightened his grip on his spears and stood still. The water was too deep to wade, too savage to swim. There was no bridge. No boat could survive those stones for even a heartbeat. For the first time since leaving the mountain, Jason hesitated. Then a voice. "Poor boy," it croaked, sharp and amused, far too close to be imagined. Such fine sandals tied with gold, and yet he doesn't know how to cross a simple stream, or is he afraid of wetting them? A shame his four-footed tutor isn't here to carry him over like a child. Jason spun around. Beside him stood an old woman he could swear had not been there a moment before. She was wrapped in a tattered mantle pulled low over her head, her thin body bent upon a wooden staff. Its handle was carved into the shape of a cuckoo, beak open as if frozen mid-cry. Her face was deeply lined, her skin weathered and pale, her posture frail, as though the wind itself might knock her down. And yet, her eyes stopped him cold. They were enormous, deep brown, clear and luminous, like polished stone beneath water. When she fixed them on him, the roaring river seemed to fall away. Jason found himself unable to look elsewhere, as though the world had narrowed to that gaze alone. In her other hand, she held a pomegranate. Its skin was smooth, rich, impossibly red. Jason noticed it at once, for the fruit was wildly out of season. "Where do you think you're going, Jason?" The sound of his name struck harder than the river's roar. Jason stiffened. He had never spoken it aloud to her, yet she said easily, as though it had always belonged to her tongue. Those vast brown eyes held him fast, deep and knowing, as if they had already witnessed every step he had yet to take. Before he could answer, a flash of color moved beside her. A peacock stepped forward, feathers shimmering in blues and greens that seemed impossibly vivid against the gray riverbank. It settled calmly at her side, regal and watchful, as though it too understood more than it should. "I'm going to Iolcos," Jason said at last, lifting his chin, "to force the usurper Peleus from my father's throne and take what was stolen from my blood." The old woman nodded slowly, unimpressed. "Well then," she rasped, her voice dry as wind through dead leaves, "if that's all, there's no need to rush. Be a good boy. Carry me across this river. My peacock and I have business on the far bank, just like you." Jason hesitated, glancing from the raging water to her frail frame. "Mother," he said carefully, "your errand can hardly outweigh the fall of a king. And look, this river is savage. If I lose my footing, it will drag us both away as easily as it swallowed that tree. I would help if I could, but I fear I lack the strength." Her eyes hardened. "Then," she said coldly, "you lack the strength to unseat a king." The words cut deeper than steel. "And hear this, Jason," she continued, "a man who refuses to aid the helpless has no right to rule anyone. What are kings for, if not to lift the weak and shield the powerless?" She leaned heavily on her staff and turned toward the river. "Very well," she muttered, her voice dry as wind through dead leaves. "I'll cross alone, with these useless old limbs. The stream may take me, but at least I'll have tried." She lowered her staff into the rushing water, probing between unseen stones, searching for a place to step. Something twisted in Jason's chest. Shame burned hotter than fear. He imagined the current tearing her away, her frail body vanishing beneath the black surge, and knew the thought would haunt him forever. No throne could silence that memory, no crown could excuse it. "Wait," he said sharply. The word rang out, firm and final. Jason stepped forward, lowering his spears to the ground. He turned his back to her and bent his knees. "Climb on," he said. "I will carry you." The river roared louder, as if angered by his choice. But Jason no longer hesitated. Whatever Chiron truly was, man, beast, or something between, his lessons had carved themselves deep into Jason's bones. Strength, he had taught, was never meant to dominate. Its highest purpose was protection. A true man lifted the weak. A true king served before he ruled. Every young woman was to be treated as a sister, every old one as a mother. Those words returned now, sharp and undeniable. Jason lowered himself to one knee and inclined his head. "Climb onto my back," he said quietly. He glanced once more at the river, measuring its fury. "This crossing isn't safe," he added, "but if your need is as great as you claim, I'll carry you. And if the river takes you, it will have to take me as well." The old woman gave a dry, rasping chuckle. "A comforting promise," she said, "but don't trouble yourself. We'll reach the other side." She slipped her arms around his neck. Jason rose, lifted her easily from the ground, and stepped into the torrent. The river struck him like a living thing, icy, relentless, roaring with the meltwater of Olympus crashing down from the heights. Foam exploded around his legs as he staggered forward, each step uncertain, each breath tight with effort. The peacock fluttered up and settled calmly on the old woman's shoulder, its bright feathers untouched by the spray, watching as though the chaos meant nothing to it. Jason gripped his spears, one in each hand, using them like anchors, probing the riverbed, feeling for stone beneath the rushing dark. Hidden rocks lurked below, waiting to betray him. At any moment, he expected the current to tear them both away, to sweep them downriver alongside shattered timber and drifting corpses. The water surged harder. It thundered from the slopes of Olympus with savage force, battering his legs as if it bore him personal malice, determined to rip the living weight from his shoulders and claim it as its own. Halfway across, disaster lunged toward him. The uprooted tree broke free upstream, spinning wildly, its splintered limbs thrusting outward like the many arms of a monstrous giant. It tore past Jason with terrifying speed, close enough that he felt its wake, but missed him by a breath. Relief lasted only a heartbeat. His foot slid, then locked. A sharp crack of pain shot through his leg as his sandal wedged fast between two submerged stones. He fought to wrench himself free, muscles screaming, the river clawing at him from every side. And then it was gone. The golden-laced sandal tore loose and vanished beneath the foam, carried away into the roaring dark. Jason swayed, off balance. The river surged, and fate at last had taken its due. A sharp cry tore from Jason's chest. The river swallowed the sound instantly. "What troubles you, Jason?" her voice asked, calm, almost amused. "Trouble enough," he answered grimly. "My sandal is gone, torn from my foot and lost among the stones. Tell me, what kind of prince arrives at a king's court with gold on one foot and bare skin on the other?" She laughed softly. "Do not mourn it," she said. "You could not have been blessed with better fortune. That missing sandal tells me everything I need to know. You are the one the speaking oak has foretold." Jason opened his mouth to question her, but the river allowed no pause. Still, her confidence steadied him. Stranger yet, as the current fought to drag him down, he felt no weakness, no fatigue. Carrying her had not drained his strength, it had awakened something deeper. With every step, power surged through his limbs, fierce and unyielding. He pushed forward. Against the roaring flood, against the weight of fate itself, Jason forced his way upward, muscles burning, breath ragged, until at last his foot struck solid ground, the far back. With a final effort, he climbed from the torrent and set the old woman gently upon the grass. The peacock hopped down beside her, feathers pristine, untouched by the violence they had crossed. Only then did Jason look down. One foot was bare. A single golden cord still clung to his ankle, frayed and useless, a quiet reminder of what the river had claimed. The old woman followed his gaze and smiled. "You'll wear finer sandals soon enough," she said, her eyes glowing warmly. "Let King Peleus see that bare foot and watch the blood drain from his face. I promise you this." She lifted her staff and pointed down the road ahead. "That is your path. Walk it boldly, and when you finally sit upon your throne, remember the old woman you carried across the river." Before Jason could respond, she turned and began to walk away, her steps light despite her years. Just once she glanced back over her shoulder and smiled, a knowing smile, full of secrets and certainty. Then she was gone. Jason stood alone at the river's edge, the roar fading behind him, the road to Iolcos stretching forward, and destiny now walking beside him, unseen. Whether it was the glow of those deep brown eyes or something far less earthly, Jason could not say. But as the old woman walked away, she seemed to change. Her frail outline straightened, the stiffness in her step faded into a measured, deliberate grace. What had looked like a painful hobble now carried the rhythm of command, as though every movement answered to an unseen throne. In that moment, Jason thought she bore herself with more dignity than any queen he had ever imagined. Behind her, the peacock descended lightly from her shoulder and followed in extravagant display. It strutted with shameless splendor, its jeweled feathers spreading wide, shimmering in blues and golds, as if the world itself were meant to witness its beauty, and Jason most of all. Then, without warning, both woman and bird vanished from sight. The air felt emptier without them. Jason stood still for a heartbeat, then turned back to the road and resumed his journey. After many miles, the land opened before him. At the base of a mountain, not far from the curve of the sea, rose a town alive with sound and color. Outside its walls gathered a vast crowd, men and women, elders and children alike, dressed in their finest garments, faces bright with expectation. It was unmistakably a day of ceremony. The crowd pressed thickest toward the shore. Above their heads, a ribbon of dark smoke curled upward, twisting into the blue sky like a signal meant for the gods. Jason stopped one of the onlookers and asked where he had come. "You stand at the edge of Iolcos," the man replied. "This is the realm of King Peleus. He has summoned us all to witness a sacred rite. He offers a black bowl to Neptune, whom he claims as his divine father. Look there where the smoke rises. That is where the king himself stands." As he spoke, the man's eyes never left Jason. His gaze moved slowly, from the leopard skin draped across the stranger's shoulders to the twin spears held with easy confidence, then down to Jason's feet. The man frowned. Jason noticed the stare, one foot bare and marked by the river's taking, the other bound in gold, his father's sandal gleaming against the dust of the road. A murmur rippled outward. "Look at him," he whispered urgently to his neighbor. "Do you see it?" Heads turned, eyes narrowed. "He wears only one sandal." The words spread through the crowd like a spark in dry grass. Jason stood motionless as curiosity shifted towards something colder, something edged with fear. Far ahead, beyond the smoke and the altar, a king was about to see a prophecy walk toward him, and destiny, long patient, had finally arrived at the gates of Iolcos. One by one, eyes turned toward Jason. First a few, then dozens, then the entire crowd seemed fixed upon him. And yet, strangely, their gaze lingered most on his feet. The golden sandal on one foot and the bare skin on the other drew whispers that spread like wildfire through the throng. "One sandal, one sandal," they murmured, voices trembling with awe and uncertainty. "The man with one sandal! At last he has come! Where from? Why here? What will the king do?" Jason felt a flush creep over him. Embarrassment prickled his cheeks. Did these people have no manners, to stare so openly at an accident of dress as if it were some personal affront? Yet he pressed onward, moving through the crowd with steady resolve. Whether he was nudged forward by the masses or carved his own path through their throng, he soon found himself standing before the smoking altar. King Pelias was there, poised with the great knife over the black bull, the firelight flickering over his stern face. The murmurs of the crowd, charged with shock and curiosity at Jason's uneven footwear, had grown so loud that the solemnity of the sacrifice was shattered. Pelias turned sharply, eyes narrowing, searching for the source of the disturbance. And then he saw Jason. The youth stood in the open space, barefoot and golden-laced foot alike, unflinching, facing the king head-on. The murmurs fell behind him, swallowed by the weight of the moment. "Who are you?" Pelias barked, his voice cutting through the chaos like a sword. "And how dare you intrude upon this sacred rite as I prepare to sacrifice a black bull to Neptune, my father?" Jason held his head high. "Your Majesty," he said evenly, "it is no fault of mine. Blame the curiosity of your subjects. They have raised this tumult because one of my feet is bare." For a heartbeat, Pelias stared at him in disbelief. Then his eyes dropped to the bare foot. The recognition struck like a hammer. "Ha!" the king muttered under his breath, a grim smile curling at the corners of his lips. "So this is the one-sandaled man, and here he stands. What indeed can I do with him?" The altar fire crackled, the black bull trembled, and Jason, standing there, felt destiny itself tighten its grip around him as the first threads of fate began to weave toward the throne. King Pelias gripped the great knife tighter, his knuckles white. For a brief moment his gaze lingered on Jason, and the idea flitted through his mind, half-formed and dangerous, that the young man might be a target even more tempting than the bull itself. The crowd around him picked up fragments of the king's muttered words, whispers at first, then swelling into a loud chorus. "The one-sandaled man has come. The prophecy must be fulfilled." Jason's heart remained steady, though he felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him. Few knew the full story, but all legends have roots in fear. Many years earlier, the speaking oak of Dodona had foretold that a man wearing only one sandal would rise to strip Pelias from his throne. Ever since, the king had obsessed over footwear. No visitor could enter his court unless both sandals were intact, examined, and accounted for. An entire officer existed solely to measure, mend, and replace worn soles at the royal treasury's expense. Yet now, here stood Jason, one sandal gone, one foot bare. The prophecy walked before the king in human form, and even Pelias, the boldest, hardest of men, felt a shiver of dread. But courage, cold and calculating, soon returned. Pelias's sharp mind immediately began to weave strategy. If fate had delivered this stranger, he would find a way to twist it to his advantage, or destroy him before it was too late. "My good young man," Pelias said at last, softening his voice to a tone almost inviting, almost gentle, as if masking venom with courtesy, "you are excessively welcome to my kingdom. Your attire, leopard skin, spears in hand, marks you as one who has traveled far. Pray tell me your name and where you received your education." Jason met the king's gaze without faltering. "My name is Jason," he said clearly. "From infancy I dwelt in the cave of Chiron the centaur. He instructed me in music, in horsemanship, in healing wounds, and also in how to inflict them with skill upon those who would do harm. The words hung in the air. The bull snorted nervously. The crowd quieted, sensing that this was no ordinary youth. Destiny, at long last, had stepped into the court of Iolchos. "I have heard of Chiron, the schoolmaster," said King Peleus, his gaze sharp and calculating. "They say his mind holds immense learning and wisdom, though it happens to sit atop a horse's body. It gladdens me to see one of his scholars in my court. But to judge how much you have profited under such an extraordinary teacher, will you permit me to pose a single question?" Jason met the king's gaze calmly. "I do not claim great wisdom," he replied, "but ask and I will answer as best I can." Peleus's smile was subtle but wicked, curling at the corners, a whisper of cunning in its edges. He spoke with measured care, each word chosen to entrap. "Tell me, brave Jason," he asked, "if there were a man in this world who, by his schemes, you had reason to believe was destined to ruin you, or even to take your life, what would you do if that man stood here before you, within your power?" Jason saw it then, the flicker of malice in Peleus's eyes. The king sought to twist words into chains, to turn honesty into peril. Yet Jason, noble and upright, could not feign deceit. As a noble prince of integrity, he knew that to lie, even for safety, would betray his own honor. He paused a heartbeat, measuring both words and consequence. Then, steady and resolute, he spoke. "I would send such a man," Jason said with certainty, "in quest of the Golden Fleece." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. For anyone else, this might have seemed a simple reply, but the Golden Fleece was no ordinary task. It was a venture that tested courage, wits, and endurance beyond measure. It demanded a voyage across unknown seas, through storms and monsters, to lands whispered of only in the oldest legends. And Jason had just named it. Peleus's eyes flickered with the first trace of alarm. This was not a boy speaking casually. This was a prince, bold, clever, and already plotting a destiny that would shake the foundations of the kingdom. The Golden Fleece, so legendary, so perilous, was a prize that few dared even to imagine claiming. Hardly any young man who undertook the voyage ever returned. Most vanished into the unknown seas, swallowed by storms, monsters, or their own inexperience. Success seemed impossible, survival a miracle. And yet, when Peleus heard Jason's answer, his eyes sparkled with a dark delight. "Well said, wise one with the single sandal," the king cried, a cruel joy threading his voice. "Go, then, and at the peril of your life, fetch me the Golden Fleece." Jason met the king's gaze calmly. "I go," he said, measured and steady. "If I fail, you need not fear my return. But if I bring the prize to Iolchos, then, King Peleus, you must descend from your lofty throne and hand me your crown and scepter." Peleus's sneer cut like a blade. "I will keep them very safely for you until then," he replied. Jason left the court, his mind already turning to the next step. He must seek the counsel of the talking oak of Dodona, the tree whose whispered wisdom could reveal the safest path to the Golden Fleece. The ancient oak stood at the heart of a shadowed wood, its trunk vast and knotted, rising 100 feet into the sky. Beneath it, the ground was swallowed in shade, a secret realm all its own. Jason stepped closer, eyes tracing the green canopy, and raised his voice as if speaking to an unseen presence within the bark. "What must I do," he asked, to win the Golden Fleece. The forest held its breath. Silence stretched across the glade, pressing against him, deep and expectant. For a long moment, nothing stirred. Then, slowly at first, the leaves of the ancient oak began to quiver. A whisper, barely audible, rustled through the branches. The sound grew, swelling into a roar, as if a hidden wind were charging through the mighty oak alone. The other trees stood still, silent witnesses, while the talking oak seemed to breathe and speak with a life of its own. Jason's heart quickened. The voice of destiny, carried by the leaves, was about to reveal the first secret of a journey that would change the world forever. Gradually, Jason thought he could make out words, though at first they were muddled like fragments of a dream. Every leaf of the ancient oak seemed to speak in its own voice, each rustle a separate syllable, and together they created a storm of sound. At first it was chaos, thousands of whispers swirling like a whirlwind. Then, as if the wind itself had learned to speak, the murmurs converged into a single resonant voice. Deep and steady, it rolled through the forest like thunder restrained, yet somehow intelligible. Jason felt the words strike his mind as if carried on invisible wings. Go to Argus, the shipbuilder, and bid him construct a galley with 50 oars. And just as suddenly, the voice dissolved, leaving only the ordinary rustle of leaves. The air grew still. Jason blinked, uncertain. Had he really heard it? Or had his imagination shaped the whispering wind into meaning? Yet the city itself offered confirmation. In Iolcos, he learned there truly was a man named Argus, renowned for his skill in shipbuilding. The oak had known. The prophecy had spoken. At Jason's request, Argus agreed to undertake the unprecedented task, to construct a vessel so vast and strong it would require 50 men to row it. The shipyard roared to life. Hammers rang, saws shrieked, and the scent of freshly hewn timber filled the air. Day by day, the hull took shape, timbers solidifying into a masterpiece of human craft. When at last the ship was near completion, it bore the proud name Argo, destined to carry heroes across uncharted seas. But Jason, wise and cautious, knew one piece of counsel might not suffice. The oak had already spoken with uncanny intelligence. Perhaps it had more to offer. Once again he returned to its massive trunk, feeling the rough bark beneath his hands, and asked, voice steady but reverent, "What must I do next?" The forest held its breath, and the ancient oak, keeper of whispers and fate, prepared to answer. This time, the talking oak stirred differently. The leaves of the mighty tree remained still, save for a single great branch that arched above Jason's head. Slowly, deliberately, it quivered, as if moved by an unseen wind, while all other boughs rested in perfect silence. "Cut me off! Cut me off!" the branch seemed to cry, its voice echoing through the quiet glade. "Carve me into a figurehead for your galley." Jason obeyed without hesitation. He severed the branch and took it to a nearby craftsman, a skilled carver who had shaped many figureheads in the traditional style, pretty, ornamental forms meant to stare at the waves with wide, unblinking eyes. Yet this time, as the tools struck the wood, something extraordinary occurred. The carver's hands were guided by a power beyond him. The chisel seemed to move of its own accord, shaping curves and lines that no human mind could have planned. Slowly the figure took form, a woman, majestic and commanding, wearing a helmet from beneath which long flowing ringlets cascaded over her shoulders. In her left hand rested a shield. At its center the terrifying lifelike visage of Medusa, her snaky hair frozen in stone. Her right arm extended forward as if pointing the way across the uncharted seas. Her face was grave, awe-inspiring, almost severe, yet not unkind, and her lips seemed poised to speak words of profound wisdom to any who gazed upon her. Jason could hardly contain his delight. He hovered over the carver as the statue took shape, insisting on every detail until at last the masterpiece was complete. It was placed at the prow of the galley, and from that day forward the figurehead guided the Argo, watching over her voyage with silent, eternal vigilance. The ship, already destined for greatness, now bore a living symbol of courage, wisdom, and destiny, carved from the heart of an enchanted oak. Jason stood for a long moment, gazing at the calm, majestic face of the statue at the prow of the Argo. Its serene, almost commanding expression seemed to hold the weight of centuries. "And now," he cried, "I must return to the talking oak and ask what next I should do." Then, to his astonishment, a soft voice spoke, familiar yet subtler than the mighty tones of the oak itself. "There is no need of that, Jason," it said, echoing from the very lips of the figurehead. "Whenever you seek counsel, you can speak with me." Jason's eyes widened. The lips of the carved statue had moved. The voice had come unmistakably from the wooden mouth itself. Slowly he realized the truth. The image had been carved from the heartwood of the talking oak of Dodona. It was no surprise that it retained its wisdom, nor its ability to speak. In fact, it was the most natural thing in the world, and an extraordinary stroke of luck that such a guide would accompany him on his perilous voyage. "Tell me, wondrous figure," Jason exclaimed, his voice ringing with urgency, "since you inherit the wisdom of Dodona, whose daughter you are, tell me, where shall I find 50 bold and courageous youths, each strong enough to take an oar of my galley? They must have hearts unshakable in danger, or we shall never claim the Golden Fleece." "Go," the statue replied, its voice steady and commanding. "Summon all the heroes of Greece." And indeed, considering the monumental task before him, what advice could have been wiser? Jason wasted no time. He dispatched messengers to every city across Greece, spreading word of his daring quest. He announced that Prince Jason, son of King Jason, was bound for the Golden Fleece, and that he sought the help of 49 of the bravest, strongest young men in the land. Each would take an oar, each would face dangers beyond imagining, and each would share in the glory and peril of the voyage. Jason himself would be the 50th. Thus began the assembling of the Argonauts, a fellowship of heroes whose deeds would echo through the ages, carried on the mighty Argo across seas unknown and dangers uncounted. The moment word of Jason's quest spread, the boldest youths of Greece sprang into action. Some had already faced giants and dragons, while the younger, less seasoned adventurers felt it a shame to have lived so long without mounting a flying serpent, plunging a spear into a chimera, or thrusting a brave arm into a monstrous lion's maw. They sensed that a lifetime of daring awaited them before even glimpsing the Golden Fleece. As soon as their helmets were polished, shields strapped tight, and swords fastened to their sides, they poured into Iolcos, eager to board the gleaming new galley. They shook hands with Jason and declared with unshakable determination that their lives were of no consequence. They would row the Argo to the farthest reaches of the earth and beyond if their prince commanded. Many of these heroes had been pupils of Chiron, the four-footed tutor who had once guided Jason himself. They were his old schoolmates, and they knew the fire of courage that burned within him. Among them strode Hercules, whose shoulders would one day bear the weight of the heavens. There were Castor and Pollux, the twin sons of Destiny, fearless even though they had hatched from an egg. Theseus, vanquisher of the Minotaur, joined the crew, as did Lynceus, whose eyes could pierce stone and gaze straight into the earth to uncover hidden treasures. And then there was Orpheus, master harper and singer. Wherever his lyre's music rang out, Even the wildest beasts danced on their hind legs, swept away by the melody. At times, his music moved more than animals. Moss-grown rocks would stir and shift, and entire groves of trees would uproot themselves, nodding and bowing as if performing a stately country dance to his song. Thus, one by one, the greatest heroes of Greece gathered aboard the Argo, each ready to face perils that would test their strength, courage, and wits. Together with Jason, they would embark on a journey that legends would remember for all time. Among the 50 heroes of the Argo was a most extraordinary rower, a young woman named Atalanta, wild and untamed, who had been nursed by a bear in the remote mountain forests. Light as a whisper, she could step from the crest of one foaming wave to another, her sandals barely kissing the water. She had grown fierce and independent, speaking boldly of the rights of women, delighting in the chase and the clash of battle far more than the quiet work of a needle. Even more remarkable were 2 sons of the North Wind, airy and blustering, with wings sprouting from their shoulders. In times of calm, they could puff up their cheeks and blow a breeze almost as fierce as their fathers, helping to push the Argo across the waters when the sea lay still. The crew also included prophets and seers, men and women who could peer into the threads of the future, predicting events days, years, or even centuries ahead, though curiously, they were often blind to the very moment in which they stood. Jason, wise and perceptive, appointed Tiphys as helmsman, a stargazer and navigator who could read the heavens and the compass alike. Lynceus, with his eyes like daggers, was stationed at the prow, able to see a whole day's journey before them. Yet, strangely, he often missed what lay directly beneath his feet. Still, if the sea was deep, Lynceus could identify the very shape of sunken rocks, sand, and even treasures hidden beneath the waves, though such discoveries rarely enriched him, and most sailors dismissed his claims as fanciful. The Argonauts, 50 brave souls in total, had prepared everything for the voyage, every oar polished, every sail secured, every hero ready to face the unknown. Yet even before the Argo could touch the sea, an unexpected obstacle threatened to halt them. The vessel, massive and majestic, was so long and heavy that the combined strength of all 50 adventurers was barely enough to shove her into the water. A murmur ran through the crew. Their journey, which promised glory, danger, and legendary feats, was about to begin with a test of strength and will, even before leaving the shore. Hercules, it seemed, had not yet reached the full measure of his legendary strength. Otherwise, he might have lifted the Argo as easily as a boy sets a toy boat afloat in a puddle. Instead, the 50 heroes pushed and strained, their faces red, muscles taut, yet the galley remained stubbornly rooted to the shore. Wearied and disheartened, they sank down onto the sand, hearts heavy. Surely, they thought, the Argo would rot and fall to pieces here, and they themselves would either swim into obscurity or abandon the quest for the Golden Fleece forever. Then Jason remembered the miraculous figurehead carved from the talking oak. "O daughter of Dodona," he cried, "how shall we set our vessel upon the waves?" The figurehead's lips moved, serene and commanding. "Seat yourselves, take your oars, and let Orpheus play." At once the heroes scrambled aboard. Their oars, 50 in all, were raised like spears toward the sky. Orpheus, who preferred the music of his harp to the back-breaking labor of rowing, swept his fingers across the strings. At the very first note, a shiver ran through the Argo, and slowly, majestically, she began to move. Orpheus played on, faster and brighter, and the galley slid into the sea, the prow dipping deeply so that the figurehead drank in the waves with its enchanted lips, then rising again with the elegance of a swan. 50 oars plunged rhythmically into the water, white foam boiling around the prow, the wake gurgling and frothing like a river in frenzy. All the while, Orpheus's music set the tempo, and the Argo seemed to dance atop the waves, guided as much by melody as by human strength. On the shore, the people cheered, but not all eyes were filled with delight. On a rocky promontory stood the wicked king Peleus, scowling as he watched the Argo glide into the horizon. Rage twisted his face, and he cursed the sea, wishing with all his heart that some tempest would rise to swallow the vessel and all aboard before they could threaten his throne. Yet the Argo, guided by enchanted wood, heroic strength, and the sweetest music in Greece, sailed onward triumphant, daring the world itself to stop her. After sailing more than 50 miles across the sparkling sea, Lynceus, with his eyes sharp as eagles, turned and squinted toward the horizon. There, on the rocky promontory, sat the wicked king Peleus, scowling like a dark thundercloud looming over the water, as if trying to command the sea itself to strike down the Argo. To pass the hours while the galley cut through the waves, the heroes spoke of the Golden Fleece, the treasure that was the heart of their quest. Once, it belonged to a miraculous ram from Boeotia, one that had carried 2 children to safety when their lives were threatened. Tragically, the girl Helle slipped from its back and was drowned, but the boy, Phrixus, survived the perilous journey to a distant shore. The faithful ram, exhausted from its heroic flight, died upon arrival. Yet in honor of its courage and loyalty, the ram's fleece was transformed into pure gold, a glowing, radiant treasure, unmatched in beauty, hanging from a sacred tree in a distant grove. For years kings had envied it, longing for such splendor in their palaces, yet none had dared to claim it. If I were to recount every adventure of the Argonauts, we would be here until nightfall, and perhaps much longer. Their journey overflowed with wonder and danger at every turn. At one island, they were warmly welcomed by King Cyzicus, who offered feasts and hospitality as though they were his own brothers. But even amid the celebration, the king's eyes betrayed sorrow and worry. Curious, Jason and his companions asked him what ailed him. King Cyzicus explained that his people were tormented by neighbors from a nearby mountain, raiders who attacked their villages, stole their livestock, and killed without mercy. As he spoke, his gaze drifted toward the looming peaks. He pointed to the mountain and asked Jason and the Argonauts, "What do you see there?" "I see some tall shapes in the distance," Jason replied, squinting toward the jagged peaks. "But they're so far away that I cannot make out exactly what they are. If I'm honest, they look like clouds, but clouds that have somehow taken on the forms of humans." Lynceus, with his legendary eagle-like vision, peered intently. "No clouds, Jason," he said, voice sharp with certainty. "They are enormous giants, each with 6 arms and every hand wielding a weapon, clubs, swords, spears, even bows and arrows." King Cyzicus nodded gravely. "Your eyes do you credit, young man. They are indeed the 6-armed monsters who have plagued my lands and my people for years. These are the foes we must face." The next morning, as the Argonauts prepared to weigh anchor, the giants descended from the mountain with thunderous strides, each step spanning 100 yards. The air trembled beneath their colossal limbs. Each giant, armed with 6 weapons in 6 arms, seemed capable of waging an entire war alone, hurling boulders, swinging clubs, stabbing with spears, and firing arrows all at once. Yet despite their terrifying size, there was a crucial weakness. Each giant possessed only one heart, no braver or larger than that of an ordinary man. Unlike the 100-armed Briareus of legend, these monsters were still vulnerable. Boldly, the Argonauts met them head-on. Steel clashed, oaths were shouted, and the battle raged. But skill, courage, and strategy won the day. Many giants fell, while the remainder fled, stumbling and scrambling, 6 arms flailing helplessly as they vanished over the hills. No sooner had they claimed victory than a new challenge appeared. In the wind-swept lands of Thrace, the Argonauts found a sorrowful, blind king named Phineus. Deserted by his people and living in near misery, he seemed utterly defeated. When Jason asked if they could help him, Phineus spoke of a torment unlike any other. 3 monstrous winged creatures, the Harpies, whose faces were eerily human, but whose bodies, wings, and claws resembled the vilest of vultures. These foul beings swooped down, stealing food, bringing ruin, and filling the poor king's life with terror. The stage was set once more. The Argo, her figurehead gleaming like a wise sentinel, floated in readiness, and Jason and his Argonauts steeled themselves for the next peril, where bravery, cunning, and magic would be tested as never before. These foul creatures, the Harpies, had long tormented King Phineus, swooping down to snatch away his food and leaving him no peace. Jason and the Argonauts, clever and brave, hatched a plan. They spread a sumptuous feast along the sunlit shore, knowing full well that the Harpies' keen noses would detect it immediately. Sure enough, hardly had the table been set when the 3 monstrous vulture women came flapping from the skies, talons outstretched, snatching up the food with greedy clutches. But the 2 sons of the north wind, airy and tempestuous like their father, sprang into the air with swords in hand, wings beating against the wind, and took chase. Hundreds of miles they pursued the Harpies, their fierce cries echoing across islands and waves. Finally, cornered, the winged thieves quailed before the 2 fierce youths. Trembling and terrified, they swore a solemn oath. Never again would they harry King Phineus or steal his meals. With that ordeal behind them, the Argonauts pressed onward, only to encounter yet another marvel. One afternoon, as they rested on a grassy island, a sudden barrage rained down upon them, not from enemies on the ground, but from the sky. Steel-headed arrows whistled past, some burying themselves in the earth, others clanging against shields, and several piercing flesh. The 50 heroes sprang to their feet, searching desperately for the hidden attackers, but there was no one in sight. No archer, no hidden snare, no trace of the enemy could be found. Then Jason's eyes lifted, and horror turned to astonishment. Above them, a massive flock of birds wheeled and hovered, each feather sharpened into a deadly projectile. The arrows had been the birds' own feathers, hurled with unnatural precision. The Argonauts, mighty and fearless, could hardly defend themselves against this aerial assault. They might all have been cut down before ever laying eyes on the Golden Fleece, if Jason had remembered the wisdom of the oaken figurehead. With a calm, commanding voice, he called upon the enchanted statue for guidance, knowing that the key to survival lay not just in strength, but in cleverness, strategy, and the magic they had carried with them from Dodona. Jason ran as fast as his legs could carry him towards the galley. "O daughter of the speaking oak, we are under siege. A flock of birds is raining down steel-pointed feathers upon us. What shall we do?" The figurehead's calm, commanding voice replied, "Strike your shields with all your might." Without hesitation, Jason dashed back to his companions, who were more dismayed than ever, far more than when they had faced the 6-armed giants. At his command, the 50 Argonauts lifted their swords and struck fiercely against their brazen shields. The clamor was thunderous, echoing across the island and up into the clouds. The birds, startled and disoriented by the overwhelming racket, abandoned their attack. Half their deadly feathers scattered in the process, and soon the flock could be seen retreating, distant and harmless, looking like ordinary wild geese against the horizon. Orpheus, celebrating their victory, played a triumphant anthem on his harp. His melody was so exquisite that Jason, ever cautious, begged him to stop, lest the sweet music lure the steel-feathered birds back to the Argonauts' decks. While the heroes rested on the island, they spotted a small vessel approaching the shore. On it were two young men of princely bearing, strikingly handsome, with the poise of true nobles. To Jason's amazement, these were none other than the sons of Phrixus, the very boy who had once been carried to Colchis on the back of the golden fleeced ram. Now grown, they had spent their youth near the sacred grove where the golden fleece still hung. They were sailing to Greece, determined to reclaim the kingdom that had been unjustly taken from their father. When the two young princes learned of the Argonauts' destination, they offered to guide them safely to Colchis, yet their voices trembled with warning, as though the very thought of the journey filled them with dread. "The tree where the golden fleece hangs," they said, "is guarded by a dragon, a monster so fearsome that anyone within reach of its jaws is devoured in a single gulp. And even if you escape that, countless other dangers lie in your path. Turn back, brave Jason, before it is too late. We would be heartbroken if you and your 49 companions were eaten mouthful by mouthful by that terrible creature." Jason listened quietly, his gaze steady and unshaken. "My friends," he replied calmly, "I do not doubt that the dragon seems fearsome to you. You have grown up in the shadow of its legend, and so it looms larger than life in your minds. But to me, this dragon is merely a serpent of great size. I am far more likely to sever its head and strip its hide than to become its breakfast. As for turning back, none of us shall see Greece again unless we carry the golden fleece with us." A roar of approval rose from the Argonauts. "We will not turn back," shouted his 49 companions in unison. "Let us board the galley at once, and if the dragon wishes to dine on us, we shall give him a hearty meal." Orpheus, never one to let courage go unsung, struck up a triumphant tune on his harp, weaving his voice into a song so stirring that every hero on the deck felt the thrill of glory in facing dragons and the honor in daring the impossible. With their spirits lifted and guided by the two princes who knew the route, Jason and the Argonauts set sail swiftly towards Colchis, their hearts brimming with daring and determination, ready to confront whatever peril awaited them at the edge of the world. When King Aeetes of Colchis learned that Jason and his band had arrived, he immediately summoned the young hero to his court. The king was a formidable man, stern, sharp-eyed, and cruel in appearance. Though he forced a polite and gracious expression, Jason could sense the cold cunning behind it, and he liked the king no more than he had liked Peleus, the usurper of his father's throne. "Great sir," said Jason, bowing low, recalling Chiron's lessons in decorum, how a noble heart must pair courage with courtesy. "Great sir," he said, "I come with a singular purpose. King Peleus, who sits upon my father's throne without right, has promised to relinquish it to me, provided I return with the golden fleece. This treasure, as your majesty well knows, hangs here in Colchis, and I humbly request your permission to take it." At these words, a shadow crossed the king's face. Aeetes prized the golden fleece above all else, and rumor held that he had secured it through acts most wicked. The very notion that Jason, accompanied by 49 of Greece's bravest warriors, had come to claim it filled him with anger and dread. "Do you understand?" Aeetes asked, fixing Jason with a piercing gaze. "The trials and conditions that must be met before the fleece can be yours." "I have heard," Jason replied calmly, "that a dragon coils itself beneath the tree where the prize hangs, and that any man who approaches risks being swallowed whole." "Quite true," said King Aeetes, smiling in a way that held no warmth at all. "Very true indeed. But before you earn the privilege of being devoured by the dragon, there are other tasks, tasks perhaps even more difficult, that must first be accomplished." The king leaned forward, clearly enjoying the moment. "You must begin by taming my 2 bulls, creatures with hooves of bronze and lungs of molten metal. Vulcan himself, the divine smith, forged them for me. Each bull has a blazing furnace within its belly, and they breathe fire from their mouths and nostrils so fiercely that no man has ever dared come near without being burned to a blackened cinder. What do you say to that, brave Jason?" Jason did not hesitate. "I must face the danger," he said evenly, "for it lies directly in the path of my purpose." King Aeetes' eyes narrowed, and he continued, determined now to shake the young hero's resolve. "After you have subdued the fiery bulls, you must yoke them to a plow and till the sacred soil of the grove of Mars. There you must sow the dragon's teeth, the same cursed seeds from which Cadmus once raised a harvest of armed warriors. Savage, lawless creatures they are, those sons of the dragon's teeth. If you fail to handle them wisely, they will turn on you with sword in hand. You and your 49 Argonauts, bold Jason, are scarcely enough to withstand such a host." "My teacher Chiron told me the tale of Cadmus long ago," Jason replied. "Perhaps I can manage the quarrelsome sons of the dragon's teeth as well as he did." King Aeetes turned away, muttering darkly to himself. "I wish the dragon would take him and that 4-footed pedant of a schoolmaster with him. What a reckless, self-important fool! We shall see what my fire-breathing bulls make of him." "Well, Prince Jason," King Aeetes continued, speaking with the politest tone he could muster, "make yourself comfortable for today. Tomorrow morning, if you insist, you shall test your skill at the plow." As the king spoke, a young woman stood silently behind the throne, her gaze fixed intently on Jason. She listened to every word, her expression a mixture of curiosity and calculation. When Jason took his leave of the king, she followed him quietly out of the chamber. "I am the king's daughter," she said, her voice low but clear. "My name is Medea. I know many things that other young princesses do not, and I can do many feats that they would scarcely dream of attempting. If you will trust me, I can instruct you in how to tame the fiery bulls, sow the dragon's teeth, and claim the Golden Fleece for yourself." Jason looked at her with both admiration and awe. "Indeed, princess," he replied, "if you do me this service, I shall be grateful to you all my life." There was a strange and wonderful intelligence in Medea's eyes. Gazing into them, Jason felt as though he were peering into a deep, bottomless well, uncertain whether he glimpsed its farthest depths or whether some hidden secret still lurked beneath. If Jason had been a man given to fear, he would have trembled at the thought of making this princess his enemy. Beautiful as she seemed now, she might in the very next instant become as terrible as the dragon that guarded the Golden Fleece. "Princess," he said, a mixture of curiosity and respect, "indeed you seem both wise and powerful, but tell me, how can you help me accomplish these feats you speak of? Are you an enchantress?" "Yes, Prince Jason," Medea said, a mysterious smile playing on her lips. "You are correct. I am an enchantress. My Aunt Circe, your father's sister, taught me the arts. I could tell you, if I chose, who was the old woman with the peacock, the pomegranate, and the cuckoo staff, the one you carried across the river. And I could reveal who speaks through the lips of the oaken image that stands at the prow of your galley. I know some of your secrets already. It is fortunate for you that I am well disposed, for otherwise the dragon would scarcely spare you." Jason met her gaze steadily. "I should not fear the dragon so much," he said, "if only I knew how to manage the brazen-footed fire-breathing bulls." "If you are as brave as I believe," Medea replied, "your own courage will guide you to deal with a mad bull. There is but one way, and you will know it in the moment of peril. As for their fiery breath, I have a charmed ointment here. It will protect you from being burned and heal any scorch you might receive." She pressed a golden box into his hand, explaining how to apply the perfumed unguent and where to meet her at weepnight. "Only be brave," she whispered, "and before daybreak the brazen bulls shall be tamed." Jason promised that his heart would not fail. He rejoined his comrades and shared with them the encounter, urging them to be ready should their aid be needed. At the appointed hour, he met Medea on the marble steps of the king's palace. She gave him a small basket containing the dragon's teeth, just as Cadmus had pulled them from the monster's jaws long ago. Together, they descended the palace steps, crossed the silent streets of Colchis, and entered the royal pasture where the two brazen-footed bulls were kept, their eyes glowing with fire, their breaths like smoke from a forge. It was a starry night, the sky etched with silver, and along the eastern horizon a faint gleam heralded the coming moon. Jason and Medea stepped into the royal pasture, where the night air was alive with the quiet rustling of grass and the low, ominous snorts of the beasts. "There they are," whispered Medea, her eyes glinting in the dim starlight. "See them in the farthest corner, chewing their fiery cuds. They are magnificent creatures, but deadly. My father and all his court delight in watching a stranger attempt to yoke them. It is a holiday in Colchis whenever such a spectacle unfolds. And believe me," she added with a mischievous smile, "in the mere twinkling of an eye, their hot breath can turn a young man into a blackened cinder." Jason's gaze did not falter. "Are you sure, beautiful Medea," he asked, "that the ointment in your golden box will truly protect me from their flames?" Her eyes, luminous in the starry gloom, met his. "If you have even the slightest doubt, if fear lurks in your heart, then it would have been better never to have been born than to step closer to these bulls." Jason's resolution, however, was unshakable. His heart burned with the singular desire to claim the Golden Fleece. He let go of Medea's hand and strode boldly forward. At a distance, 4 streams of fiery vapor rose and fell in steady rhythm, casting a flickering, hellish light across the pasture. The bulls lay there, calm yet deadly, their breath, a silent, scorching warning, creeping from 4 nostrils like smoke from the fires of a forge. Every heartbeat seemed to echo in the still night, as if the very world paused to witness what would happen next. At the first 2 steps Jason took, the fiery streams from the bulls gushed more fiercely. The brazen beasts had heard his footfall and lifted their scorching snouts to scent the intruder. Sparks flew, and tongues of flame leapt higher with each stride. By the 3rd step, he could see the full terror of the creatures, glowing eyes, jets of white-hot fire, and hooves that clanged against the earth like ringing anvils. Then came the roar, terrible, earth-shaking, echoing across the pasture. Flames erupted from their nostrils, casting a blinding momentary light over the field. Jason's pulse quickened, yet he moved onward, every step bringing the bulls nearer. Like lightning they charged, breathing white-hot fire that scorched the grass and set a dry tree ablaze nearby. The heat was intolerable, yet Jason remained unharmed, the enchanted ointment Medea had given him curling around his body like an invisible shield, protecting him as if he were made of fireproof stone. Now the young hero faced the full force of the brazen bulls. As they lunged to toss him aside, Jason acted with extraordinary courage and strength. With his right hand, he seized one bull by its gleaming horn. With his left, he gripped the twisted tail of the other. The creatures struggled, bellowing and stamping, yet Jason's hold was like iron. The secret of their ferocity was enchantment. and by his sheer boldness and fearless command, Jason had broken the spell. The fiery fury of the brazen bulls, once deadly and uncontrollable, now bowed to the courage of a single mortal. And from that moment, brave men ever after spoke of taking the bull by the horns, and gripping him by the tail, too, as the boldest way to conquer fear itself. With the spell broken, Jason found it easy to yoke the brazen bulls and harness them to the long-neglected plow, which had lain rusting in the field for countless years, abandoned because no one had dared attempt it. Perhaps Chiron, the wise old centaur, had once taught Jason the art of plowing, or maybe he simply possessed a hero's instinct. Whatever the reason, the furrows were cut cleanly, and by the time the moon had climbed a quarter of the sky, the field lay before him, a broad stretch of dark, rich earth, ready for its peculiar sowing. Jason scattered the dragon's teeth across the soil and harrowed them in carefully with the plow. Then he stepped back, heart pounding, to watch the strange harvest unfold. "Must we wait long for harvest time?" he asked Medea, who had accompanied him into the field. "Whether sooner or later," she replied, her voice calm yet full of mystery, "it will surely come. A crop of armed men always springs from the dragon's teeth once they touch the earth." The moon now rode high in the sky, spilling silver light across the freshly plowed field. At first, there seemed to be nothing at all. Any ordinary farmer would have said that the seeds needed weeks to sprout, months to ripen. But here, no ordinary growth would appear. Slowly, faint glimmers began to shine like dew upon the soil. The light grew brighter, and, astonishingly, the gleaming points revealed themselves to be the steel heads of spears. And then, one by one, the warriors began to rise, armed, alert, and ready for battle, the miraculous sons of the dragon's teeth, springing fully formed from the dark earth to face the bold young hero. A dazzling gleam suddenly flashed across the field as countless polished brass helmets caught the moonlight. Beneath them, dark, bearded faces struggled free from the soil, warriors born of the dragon's teeth. Their first gaze upon the world was fierce and unyielding, eyes blazing with wrath and defiance. Bright breastplates gleamed, swords and spears gripped tightly in their right hands, shields braced upon their left arms. As the moonlight touched the plowed field, these strange warriors, still half buried, thrashed with impatience, as if tearing themselves from the earth by sheer force of will. Wherever a dragon's tooth had fallen, there now stood a man fully armed for battle. The clang of steel on steel rang out as swords struck shields, and each warrior glared at the others with furious intensity. They had emerged into a world of peace, yet their hearts seethed with rage, stormy passions, and a readiness to spill blood simply for having been given life. Throughout history, armies had been known for their fierceness, but none were so strange, so inexorably violent as these sprung from dragons' teeth. They had no mothers to temper their wrath, no tender human beginnings, only battle in their bones. Any commander, from Alexander to Napoleon, would have marveled to summon an army so effortlessly. The warriors flourished their weapons, clashing swords and shields, their cries echoing across the moonlit field. "Show us the enemy! Lead us to the charge! Death or victory! Come on, comrades! Conquer or die!" 100 such battle cries rang out, fierce and unrelenting. Jason, standing at the edge of this strange and fearsome assembly, drew his sword at last. The reflection of countless blades in the moonlight made the field shimmer with menace. In that moment, he knew that courage alone would have to guide him through this unprecedented challenge. In an instant, the sons of the dragon's teeth surged forward, shouting with one fierce, unified voice, "Guard the Golden Fleece!" Swords were raised, spears thrust outward, and Jason realized at once that no single mortal arm could hope to withstand such a bloodthirsty horde. Yet, undaunted, he resolved to face them bravely, as if he himself had sprung from a dragon's tooth. Medea, watching from the edge of the field, called out sharply, "Seize a stone, Jason! Throw it among them! Quick! It is the only way to save yourself!" Jason stooped, snatched a heavy stone from the earth, and hurled it with all his strength. It struck the helmet of a towering warrior rushing at him, glanced off another's shield, and then smacked squarely into the face of a third. Each of the three assumed the blow had come from a comrade, and fury instantly turned inward. Blades and spears whirled as the soldiers attacked one another, shouting and striking with terrifying force. Chaos erupted. Arms were severed, shields shattered, heads toppled, and legs were hacked away in a frenzy of mistaken vengeance. Jason could hardly believe his eyes, yet he could not help a laugh at the sight of these mighty warriors destroying each other for the offense he had orchestrated. Almost as quickly as they had risen from the soil, the army of Dragon's Teeth lay decimated. Only one man remained, the fiercest, strongest of all. He lifted his crimson sword, shouting triumphantly, "Victory! Victory! Immortal fame!" And in that same instant, he too fell, joining his fallen brethren in the moonlit field. The danger had passed, and Jason, standing among the quiet aftermath, could scarcely believe the astonishing victory that had been wrought with nothing more than a single well-aimed stone. And so ended the army that had sprung from the dragon's teeth. That fierce and feverish battle had been the only taste of life they would ever know on this beautiful earth. "Let them rest in the bed of honor," said Princess Medea, her lips curling into a sly smile as she glanced at Jason. "The world will always have enough simpletons like them, fighting and dying for reasons they scarcely understand, fancying that posterity will bother to place laurel wreaths on their rusty, battered helmets. Could you help smiling, Prince Jason, at the self-conceit of that last fellow as he tumbled down?" Jason shook his head gravely. "It made me very sad, Princess, and to tell the truth, the Golden Fleece seems hardly worth the effort after all I have witnessed tonight." "You will see differently in the morning," replied Medea. "True, the Golden Fleece may not be as precious as you imagined, but still there is nothing better in the world. Every great undertaking must have an object. Come now, your night's work has been extraordinary. Tomorrow you may inform King Aetes that the first part of your task is complete." Following Medea's counsel, Jason rose early the next morning and made his way to the palace of King Aetes. Standing at the foot of the throne, he bent in a deep, respectful obeisance. "Your eyes look heavy, Prince Jason," remarked the king, his voice tinged with both suspicion and amusement. "I see you have passed a sleepless night. Perhaps you have reconsidered the matter and wisely decided not to risk being scorched to a cinder while attempting to tame my brazen-lunged bulls. That, may it please your majesty, has already been accomplished. The bulls have been tamed and yoked, the sacred field has been plowed, the dragon's teeth have been sown and harrowed into the soil, and the warriors that sprang from them have done battle, slaying one another to the last man." And now Jason, his heart steadfast, spoke boldly. "I humbly solicit your majesty's permission to face the dragon, that I may take down the Golden Fleece from the tree and depart with my 49 comrades beside me." King Aetes scowled, his face twisting with anger and alarm. He knew by his own royal promise that he ought to allow Jason the chance to claim the fleece if the young hero had the courage and skill to do so. Yet, having seen Jason succeed with the brazen-footed bulls and the crop of dragon's teeth, the king feared the same fate might befall the dragon itself. Though he would have gladly seen Jason devoured at a mouthful, he resolved, wrongly and cruelly, to protect his beloved Golden Fleece at all costs. "You never would have succeeded in these matters, young man," the king snarled. "Had my undutiful daughter Medea not aided you with her enchantments, by your own merit you would now be nothing but a black cinder or a handful of white ashes. I forbid you, on pain of death, to attempt the Golden Fleece again. To speak plainly, you shall never lay eyes upon even one of its glistening locks." Jason left the court, sorrow and anger boiling within him. He could think of no better plan than to summon his 49 brave Argonauts, march to the Grove of Mars, confront the dragon, seize the Golden Fleece, and make for the Argo with all sails unfurled for Iolcos. He knew the danger was immense. 50 mouths of a single dragon might easily swallow them all. As he hurried down the marble steps, a voice rang out behind him. "Jason!" It was Princess Medea. She beckoned him back, her black eyes gleaming with such sharp intelligence that he felt as if some hidden serpent lurked within them. Though she had already aided him with extraordinary power the night before, he could not be certain she intended no mischief this time. Enchantresses, he knew, were never entirely to be trusted. "What says King Aeetes, my royal and upright father?" inquired Medea, a sly smile playing on her lips. "Will he grant you the Golden Fleece without any further danger or trouble?" "On the contrary," replied Jason, his brow furrowed. "He is furious with me for taming the brazen-footed bulls and sowing the dragon's teeth. He forbids me to attempt anything further and flatly refuses to give up the Golden Fleece, whether I slay the dragon or not." Medea nodded knowingly. "Yes, Jason, and there is more. If you do not set sail from Colchis before the sun rises tomorrow, the king intends to burn your 50-oared galley and put you and your 49 brave comrades to the sword. But take heart, the Golden Fleece you shall have, if it lies within the power of my enchantments to secure it. Wait for me here an hour before midnight." At the appointed hour, the pair might again have been seen stealing through the moonlit streets of Colchis, Jason and Medea, side by side, slipping silently toward the sacred grove at the heart of the city, where the Golden Fleece hung glittering upon its ancient tree. As they crossed the pasture, the brazen bulls approached Jason. Lowing gently, nodding their massive heads, they thrust forth their snouts, craving the friendly caress of his hand. Their fierce natures had been thoroughly tamed, and the 2 fiery furnaces in their stomachs extinguished. Now, instead of belching fire and sulphurous vapor, they breathed the sweetest, most comforting cow breath. The bulls grazed and chewed their cud with unprecedented ease, delighting in the simple pleasure of grass, something that had once been nearly impossible, for every mouthful had previously been shriveled to ash by their own fiery breath. Jason could scarcely help but smile at the strange, peaceful transformation. The once maddened beasts, now gentle as lambs, were living proof that courage, skill, and a touch of magic could turn the fiercest of perils into allies. After kindly patting the now gentle bulls, Jason followed Medea's guidance deeper into the Grove of Mars. The ancient oaks, towering and centuries old, cast shadows so thick that the moonlight struggled to pierce them. Only here and there did a faint glimmer touch the leaf-strewn earth, or a soft breeze stir the boughs just enough to reveal a glimpse of the sky above, lest Jason forget that one still watched from afar. At last, in the heart of the dusky grove, Medea squeezed his hand. "Look yonder," she whispered. "Do you see it?" Through the shadows, a golden radiance gleamed, warm, alive, and unlike any moonlight. Suspended at about a man's height from the ground, it shimmered between the venerable trunks, glowing as if lit from within. "What is it?" asked Jason, breathless. "Have you come so far to seek it?" exclaimed Medea, "and do you not recognize the reward of all your toil and danger now shining before your eyes? That, Jason, is the Golden Fleece." Jason took a few cautious steps forward and stopped, overcome by awe. Oh, how magnificent it looked! Its brilliant strands shimmered with a golden light of their own, a treasure beyond reckoning, coveted by countless heroes, many of whom had perished in their quest, felled by treacherous seas, fiery bulls, or the very dragons that guarded it. "How gloriously it shines!" Jason cried, his voice trembling with rapture. "It has surely been bathed in the richest gold of sunset. Let me hurry and take it to my heart." "Stay," Medea warned, holding him back gently. "Have you forgotten what guards it?" In his awe, Jason had almost lost sight of the peril that still lay ahead. And then, as if to remind him, a movement stirred in the shadows, the unmistakable fearsome breath of a dragon, coiled and watchful, sent a shiver down his spine. The greatest challenge yet awaited, and Jason knew that the true test of courage was only just beginning. An antelope, perhaps mistaking the golden radiance for the sunrise, came bounding fleetly through the grove. It charged straight toward the Golden Fleece, but with a frightful hiss, the dragon's immense head shot out from its twisted coil around the tree. Half its scaly body loomed into view, and with a single thunderous snap of its jaws, the poor antelope was swallowed whole. Satisfied for the moment, the dragon prowled, sensing some other living creature within reach. Its long, sinuous neck stretched in terrifying arcs, poking its ugly snout among the oaks, weaving here, there, and dangerously close to where Jason and Medea crouched behind a tree. The monstrous head waved and undulated through the air, coming almost within arm's length of the young prince. Its jaws yawned wider than the grand gateway of a king's palace, an utterly horrifying sight. "Well, Jason," whispered Medea, a sly glint in her eyes, "what do you think now of your chances to win the Golden Fleece?" Jason said nothing, only drew his sword and stepped boldly forward. "Stay, foolish youth," Medea warned, gripping his arm. "Do you not see that without me you are lost? In this gold box is a magic potion, far more potent against the dragon than your sword." The dragon, perhaps alerted by their voices, shot its black head and forked tongue through the trees like lightning, lunging full 40 feet at a stretch. Quick as thought, Medea poured the contents of the gold box down the monster's gaping throat. Immediately, the dragon let out a horrendous hiss and flung its massive tail toward the sky, shattering the highest branches of the oaks as it crashed back to earth. With one last terrifying convulsion, it fell full length upon the ground, motionless, vanquished. "It is only a sleeping potion," whispered Medea to Jason, her eyes glittering in the moonlight. "One always finds a use for these mischievous creatures sooner or later. I did not wish to kill him outright. Quick, snatch the prize and let us be gone. You have won the Golden Fleece." With a heart pounding in triumph, Jason seized the gleaming fleece from the tree. Its golden radiance cast long, shimmering streaks through the shadowy grove as he hurried along the leaf-strewn path. Every step revealed glimpses of the mysterious woods, yet the brilliance of the prize lit his way like a beacon. Ahead, he glimpsed the old woman he had once helped across the stream, her peacock strutting proudly by her side. She clapped her hands in delight, beckoned him to hasten, and then vanished into the darkness. A few hundred feet above, the two winged sons of the north wind wheeled gracefully in the moonlight. Jason called to them, and they sped off, alerting the Argonauts to embark without delay. But Lynceus, sharp-eyed as ever, had already spotted Jason approaching with the Golden Fleece, despite the stone walls, the hill, and the shadowy depths of the Grove of Mars standing between them. Following his advice, the heroes were seated on the Argo, oars held high and ready to launch the vessel into the sea. As Jason neared, the voice of the talking image rang out, urgent and sweet. Make haste, Prince Jason, for your life make haste." With a mighty bound, he leapt aboard the galley. At the sight of the Golden Fleece's dazzling glow, the 49 Argonauts erupted in a triumphant shout. Orpheus, lifting his harp, struck a jubilant chord, singing a song of victory so stirring that the Argo seemed to lift from the waves, flying homeward across the sea as though she bore wings.
And thus the story ended. If you liked this journey into the worlds of classic literature, do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more. And hey, if there's a classic tale you'd love to hear told in this suspenseful style, drop its name in the comments below. Your suggestion might be our next chilling adventure.